Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host Shwin and this episode 499. I'm joined as always by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPen89 on Twitter. On this Memorial Day Monday afternoon, Stacy, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Victory Monday, so can't complain too much.
Certainly cannot complain. Not especially not after the way uh, the Knicks managed to pull out that game yesterday. They win 106-100, come back from 20 down in the second quarter. They were down 55-35, pretty much season on the line. We're going to talk about that. But before we do, I need to make a few announcements. First, the Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you've not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.strict.land. There's a link that's taking to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find in there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord with the conversation for subs. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod, where I rant with them. You can see more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Murdo, one of the best in the business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Metrikos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier, which comes with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially hosting podcasts alongside yours truly whenever you choose to subscribe. Not necessarily possible that you. And that's that. All right, let's get started. The Knicks come back in pretty spectacular fashion to win this game. They took it down the stretch from Indiana. They outscored them 36-20 in the fourth quarter, largely on the strength of, one of the all-time great performances in Karl-Anthony Towns' career. He has 20 points and 8 rebounds in the fourth quarter. Just spectacular stuff from him. Got contributions up and down the roster. Brunson didn't have the best night. He still had 23. Bridges, again, not a great night, had 15. I thought he powered through what was a rough start to the game and closed it much stronger on the defensive end of the floor. OG Anunoby, his best game of the series by far, as far as I'm concerned, in his terms of his two-way performance. Josh Hart, the move to the bench, I'm not going to say it unlocked him, but I do think that he was able to provide a real spark off the bench, particularly in the fourth quarter. Deuce McBride, again, continues to come up and have an impact in these games. You got contributions from Dylan Wright and Landry Shamet, who hadn't even played really at all in the postseason. Mitchell Robinson, I thought he got off to a good start. Slowed down, we'll talk about that. But, yeah, I mean, I guess just what were your takeaways from all of it? Because there was a lot. I mean, there was a lot that happened in this game. Press had a pretty funny tweet where he was like, Thibs speed ran a full season's worth of experimentation in 48 minutes. And it did feel like that. Like, it's hard to really fully grasp and put into context the entirety of the game because it did just feel like a contest where, especially from the Knicks side of it, where it was just, you had lineups that you hadn't seen all season. You had lineups that probably were not intended to be seen yesterday, but had to come about because of foul trouble. But in the end, the Knicks pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually. I wasn't as surprised by the Shamet DeLon Wright minutes because once he made the starting lineup change, I think that put a lot on the table. And we know how he is, right? When his back is against the wall, that is when we have seen him experiment. And that's when he made the Alfred Payton change. There were 1-1, I think, when he made the change, right? Or was it game 2 that he made the change? We know that he literally has to get to the. It's like somebody who like waits till the day before the paper is due, pulls an all-nighter, but like writes great when the pressure is completely on, right? Not to say that Thibs doesn't prepare or whatever, but that part wasn't as shocking to me. I just think in general they had a level of desperation on defense and focus Those two things don't always go together, but they had that in a way that they haven't always consistently had. I think someone in the Discord said, you know, it's going to be tough for them to play that level of defense for 48 minutes for 7 games. But they needed it last night. Indiana was just in complete rhythm when they went up 20. There was a lot of adversity, right? Deuce McBride might have been like Deuce McBride got 3 fouls in 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. I think it was like 80 seconds. That kind of compounded or really kind of subverted the benefits you get from changing that starting lineup, right? Brunson and Cat were both in foul trouble. Brunson struggled for most of the game. We talk about Cat's fourth quarter; it was incredible, but going into the fourth, he only had 4 points. That's pretty like you're not getting anything from your top two guys for most of the game. But they handled adversity and they got to a level of urgency, I think, that maybe we haven't always seen. I'm not one of the people calling them soft, by the way, to your caption. But I think it's finding that flow or whatever you want to call it on both ends has been tough for the Knicks to get to. But when they've shown it, the results have been great, right? It often comes with their backs against the wall. We saw it with Boston. As much as you might want to see more consistency, and we can talk about lineups, we can talk about the lack of depth, we can talk about some of the shortcomings of Cat and Brunson that lead to that. But it's some comfort. It's been huge that they can tap into that. And the last thing I want to say, it's very fascinating because both of these, the Pacers have had these 3 comebacks. That had never been done. The Knicks have had 3 20-point comebacks in the playoffs. That hasn't been done. All 3 on the road. Both have been great road teams. And it's just funny because it's in such different ways, right? The Pacers, it makes complete sense that they would be that they'd be a comeback, a team that can come back, right? They take lots of threes, they play fast, right? So you can get more possessions in, and they force turnovers, right? So they are an inherently high variance, or they can inject variance when they need to. The Knicks, on the other hand, play at a slower pace. They don't, they're not as aggressive on defense and forcing turnovers. But they are kind of that slow burn where they are able to limit turnovers so things don't spiral. They obviously had a bad first half in terms of turnovers, but we know that, they're capable of just getting buckets without having to play high risk offense. They're able to attack the offensive glass. And they have this ability to slowly come back in games because it's tough to just really bury them. So it's kind of super interesting. This series has been all about a clash of styles. I think if I wasn't so emotionally involved, I'd probably be able to appreciate that even more, but it is just a fascinating contrast. And this has been a really, again, for us, heartbreak, whatever, but you look at it from a basketball standpoint, super entertaining series.
Yeah, it's definitely been an entertaining series. I would like less entertainment. That would be nice, maybe, if the Knicks could pull out a blowout.
Are you not entertained?
I don't know. Are heart attacks entertaining? Maybe. But I would like if the Knicks could just blow them out once. That would be nice. It looked like they were going to do that in game 1, and then we all know what happened from there.
Would you say it's fair to say game 3 and game 1 kind of a wash at this point? The Pacers blew a lead, the Knicks blew a lead. I think the Knicks was way more improbable, but 20 points is a big lead too, right? So,
I guess. I don't know. I don't think it's the same thing. I think a 20-point lead in the second quarter, improbable, sure, but not exactly one that, you see that all the time, especially nowadays in the playoffs. It seems like, 14 with 2 minutes left. Not sure you're going to see that one too often.
Literally hadn't happened before. So
right. So yeah, like I maybe you can look at it that way. I certainly don't feel that way, but I can understand that viewpoint. That said, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to come out of this game. And one thing but I think it's fair to give Thibs credit for finally making the change in the starting lineup. Now, we can sit here and debate, should it have happened before? When it should have happened? Why did it take this long? Blah, blah. But you have to give him credit for that. The downside of waiting this long is, I I don't want to say it's what we saw last night, because last night what we saw was 20-point comeback. But I think in the idea of, it's small stuff. It's very specific stuff. Like, for example, I don't have a problem with Mitch starting. I would start Deuce. But if you're going to make the change, there's only 2 changes you can make. He picked one of the 2. Fine. Fair enough. You want to go double big? Cool. I get it. But we all kind of understand, or should understand, what Mitch's limitations are. And one of them, which is what we saw in game 2, even, which was, okay, starters get off to a bad start. Mitch comes in, and then you play him the final, 17 minutes and 12 seconds or whatever of the first half, and you go from 10 down to 3 up. So that works. The problem is you kind of like use up all of Mitch's powers in that first half. And when he comes back into the second half, I'm not going to say he was a disaster, but he certainly didn't have the impact that he had in the first half. You could see that he was slower, not as active on either end of the floor, not as active even on the offensive glass. So you come into game 3, he's going to start. He still keeps the sub for Cat the same. So Cat's like the first sub out. He comes out, I think, around the 6-minute mark. Mitch plays until there's under 2 left in the first quarter. So he plays about like 10 minutes, 30 seconds, something like that. I think you got to switch that. But I don't like, this is the problem with making these kind of changes right in the middle of a playoff series, because when you don't try that stuff in the regular season, now you kind of, it's not just the starting lineup you have to figure out, right? It's how do you manage your 48-minute rotation after that? And I think there was stuff that was outside of his control, obviously, like Deuce, like you mentioned. Deuce picked up 3 fouls in 122 seconds or whatever, it was minute 22, I think. Like that's out of his control. Brunson got, he had 4 fouls in the first half. His 5th was in the fourth. I mean, that was a joke. I can't believe that call. Cat has 3 fouls in the first half. Like, there's all this foul stuff that he's had to kind of battle through in the first half. So I don't think the first half is a clear indication of how he would manage his lineups if all things were equal. But I do think very specifically it's worth consideration to make Cat extend his minutes out in that first quarter and sub Mitch out first. And what I would also suggest is we have a decent amount of evidence here at this point, right? That, Cat, Brunson, Hart, those 3 together, individually, all varying levels of quality players. Together, maybe not so much. And if you want to minimize that, what you probably should think about doing is subbing out Brunson with Mitch, bringing in Hart and Deuce at that point in time. And if you look at it, one of the Knicks' most positive lineups in the back half of the season was the starters with Deuce in place of Brunson, which was the starting lineup when Brunson was out with an injury. So I think I would
say that in the first quarter. Oh yeah, you're right. That was the first quarter.
Yeah. So I think you would feel comfortable closing with that. You have a decent data set here that shows you that lineup. It's not going to be some fucking juggernaut, but they make you work defensively and offensively. You kind of have an understanding of everything runs through Cat, simplifies things, and they're able to cook that way. So I would go with that, and then you can kind of figure out how do you want to mitigate having. I think what you really need to mitigate is Brunson and Cat in lineups together where one of the other 3 is Josh Hart and there's not a center on the floor. So basically avoid the minutes where Josh Hart and 2 other wings are on the floor with Brunson and Cat. If it's Deuce instead of one of Mikal or OG, I think you have a better chance, but I still think it's a problem.
Why would you say that?
I just think that Deuce has better point of attack defense, and that matters a lot against Indiana because they're going to force Deuce. He's a much better point of attack defender than Bridges.
He's better getting through screens. I think Bridges can contest a little bit better. So I don't know if it's as much of a slam dunk as it, but he's definitely way better at screen navigation. That's not up for debate.
Right, and Indiana's runs so many screens. They get through so many actions. I think he gives you a much better chance than any of these guys with Hart, whatever, just that lineup construct. That's all very hard to do, by the way. I don't think Thibs' job here is easy or enviable, but this is the
That's
job.
what the money's for.
Well, yeah, that's what the money's for. But this is why when you don't try this stuff in the regular season, when you don't try to game out different scenarios, right now when you're in the playoffs and you've had to make an adjustment, it's not just the initial adjustment that needs to be made. It's all this other stuff. So I'm not even, and I'm not. I want to say two things. I didn't mind that he sat Karl Anthony Towns in the fourth quarter of game 2. I thought that was a totally fine decision. I have no issue with that. And I think that people criticizing him for it are wrong. I think you're judging based on the name of the player and the fact that Knicks didn't come back and win the game. I think you're using that to be critical of Thibs of a decision that, in terms of basketball reasoning, I think totally fair game. I don't that would not be my criticism of him. My criticism of him would be that decision isn't made in isolation, and I thought he was completely flailing in kind of how that manifested in terms of the totality of lineups put out there, right? Like the campaign thing was fucking insane in game 2. I'll never understand that. Whatever. We don't need to relive it. But I didn't have a problem with him, kind of rolling with Mitch as long as he did, even though Mitch was gassed. I understood why that was the case. Cat had he had a really bad defensive stretch when he was in. So I got why he benched Cat down the stretch of that game for a large part of it. And then yesterday, I'm not going to criticize him for some of the weird lineups and rotations we saw, because some of that was forced on him by foul trouble. And some of it is, guess what? When you make a change this late into a season and you don't have confidence or a full wherewithal of how that's going to play out in your rotations and lineups, there's going to be stuff that you still need to figure out as it goes along. Did he nail all of it perfectly? No, I don't think so. But I think he has an opportunity to clean up some of that stuff. And they won the game, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say that they won the game because of the starting lineup change. I think that's way too simplistic. But I think the fact the starters did not get blitzed in their minutes was good. And the fact that he pulled the plug on the campaign thing and he gave Dylan Wright a shot. He gave Lander Shamet a chance. And, I think the cynical view would be like, well, those guys got a chance because of foul trouble. Sure, but he still had to hand it to them. He could have easily just been like, no, I'm going to dial up more minutes for McCall and OG and Josh. Campaign. Yeah, or whatever. And he didn't do that. So he deserves credit for pushing those buttons. And yeah, I mean, again, was it like a coaching masterclass? No, but I'll tell you what, I think if I'm the Indiana Pacers and I'm Rick Carlisle, I feel like the gap in terms of the coaching disparity, which I thought was pretty significant, certainly in the second half of game 1, I should say very specifically, the final quarter of game 1, and then into game 2. I thought game 2 was one of Thibs' worst coaching games of this season anyway, definitely of this postseason. Just felt like he was behind the 8 ball, kept trying to make up for how bad the starters were, and I thought he was flailing, quite honestly. So for him to make the adjustment he did, and to overcome the fact that it wasn't clean, it wasn't like he just made the adjustment and everything worked out perfectly. He had to adjust to guys getting into foul trouble and all these other things that occurred during the course of this game. You go down by 20, and I thought a lot of that 20-point lead they got, it was just like, yeah, guys fucking up on sloppy execution offensively. And, I have my own issues with how the offense operates right now under Thibs, and I think some of that is systemic. But at the end of the day, he pushed enough of the right buttons to come out of this game with the victory. And, if I'm a Knicks fan, which I am, I think I think we should all be very pleased and happy with this, because you're closer. Like, the fact that he made the change means you're closer. Now it's about him kind of figuring out the minutes post start of each half that are the starters. And, some of it's going to have to be by trust your gut type of instinct, but um, there are combinations and there are lineups that we know are good for them. And what I would say, more so than Shamit, and Shamit played well yesterday, so I'm not trying to minimize what he did, but more so than Shamit, I think seeing what Dylan Wright can give you defensively in this series, considering how much the Pacers are kind of forcing you to scramble and switch and just kind of fly around and cover space. Dylan Wright's a player to me that should probably be being, considered a consistent part of this rotation moving forward, at least for the rest of this series, anyways.
Yeah, and this, I mean, I think with Wright, I'm not going to blame Thibs too much for not playing him. You acquired him right at the deadline, so that becomes tough. I think that let's remember this is a guy who last year, yes, they got swept. He averaged 27 minutes per game in the playoffs last year in Miami. This is a guy who was on those LeBronto teams, playing, bench minutes, but rotation minutes. Played in Dallas in the playoffs. So this hasn't been some, starting point guard level championship contender experience consistently. But this is a guy who's been in those situations. He's been on the floor against LeBron James in the playoffs. He's been on deeper runs, and he gives you size, physicality, and one thing that helps Deuce is Wright. He at this point in his career probably not a very high level offensive threat, but he can get you into sets. He can handle pressure. He can allow Deuce to play a little bit more off ball with the bench. And I think that's the key thing, because Indiana, one thing they've really had a lot of success with on defense is just when their press really forces the Knicks to not start a set until 16, 15, 14 seconds. Or even if they cross half court, Brunson or Deuce has their back completely turned and you can't get into a set, right? And Shamit, it's worth noting, also has had playoff experience, right? So these guys were probably not guys you can rely on 15, 20, 25 minutes a night. There's a reason they're on the team. And especially in this kind of series, using those bodies, I mean, the fact that, Deuce was fresh in the second half because he hadn't played much in the first half. Cat was, more fresh down the stretch. So maybe you can say that's because of foul trouble, but it was a bit of maybe I don't want to call it a blessing in disguise. You don't want those guys to get foul trouble, but the longer rotation, you saw the effort that they had in that fourth quarter, especially on defense. One stat that really stuck out, I think Benji tweeted this. So the Pacers in the regular season averaged 35 threes per game. So on game one, they took 37. A lot of that came in that fourth quarter barrage and collapse for the Knicks. They had 30 in game two. And then last night, they only had 25. The Knicks shot more threes than the Pacers and made them. If you told me that was going to happen in a game, I would say, hey, the Knicks are winning. If they're winning the three-point battle against this team, obviously it wasn't quite that straightforward. But I do think they were fresher. And, to your point, I will say a couple things. I think that the worry about why he brings Cat out first is because he wants Cat to run that bench lineup. Is this a series to maybe invert that and have Brunson the guy who babysits the bench? The downside of that is, can Cat be as effective against, being the hub of the offense against Indiana starters? But that might be, do you have enough ball handling at that point if they're going to be bringing in, their top defenders? But that could be another place where Delon Wright maybe can add some ball handling, right? Or to your point, if you bring in Hart as well, he's kind of showing the ability to be that secondary ball handler. And once you get it to half court, let Cat cook. Clearly, it worked yesterday. I do think though that you probably have to explore something like that, to your point, because Mitch playing, when he's fresh, he is as impactful as anyone, and his impact is so unique. And the other thing you didn't mention, but kind of the downside with starting Mitch instead of Deuce is that people have talked about this, right? What they've been doing essentially is screening with Cat's guys. So if Cat is on Siakam, use Siakam as a screener, and then put Mitch in the corner, right? So you're still able to attack Cat, and you're able to remove the rim protector just because of all the shooting they have. And there's not really a guy you can just have Mitch cheat off of. I mean, Nembhard at this point, whatever the shooting percentages were in the regular season, you can't really give him the Josh Hart treatment. I had been thinking.
Are we sure about that? I'm not sure about that. I think you can give him the Josh Hart treatment. I don't think he wants to shoot the threes. I think that if you close out, it's not the same exact thing as Josh Hart. But I think the Knicks are slowly starting to understand this in this series. For as dynamic as Indiana's offense is, they don't have a guy that you're like, oh man, like if you just give him a sliver of space, he's going to get off a quality three. I know Aaron Nesmith went off in that game one, but I think the Knicks gave him too much airspace.
There's Hallie too, right? Hallie's got the step backs, and
yeah, but that's him creating that. This is not a guy that you're like, if I close out to him, he's not just going to get it up off of like if there's no space there. That's not a type of shot. He has to create that space for himself. He's not a tight contest shooter. Not certainly off the catch. So I think the Knicks are understanding this now, and they did a much better job, particularly in the second half yesterday, of it's fine to help off of your man, but when you close out to them, you got to close out under control. Don't jump in the air, close out under control, and if they drive at that point, then you react from there. But I think with Nembhard and all these guys, really, I mean, to varying degrees, Nembhard or Nesmith, I think you have to give less space than Nembhard, for example. But if you're disciplined about rotating out to them and not rotating out wildly, I think you're okay. And I'm not going to say you treat Nembhard exactly like Josh Hart, but I don't think you need to treat him like Steph Curry either. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can play off of him and recover in a way that still makes life hard. And quite honestly, I thought Nembhard sucked yesterday. He wasn't good. I thought the Knicks did a very good job on him. Every time he drives, they were able to stay in front. And I think they understood that he likes to get back to that kind of fadeaway jumper once he drives and puts a shoulder into you. I thought they did a really, really good job of playing to that. I'm assuming that was probably on their kind of pre-game notes or whatever. So good job by the Knicks on Andrew Nembhard. I thought they did a great job on him yesterday.
Yeah, and then the other part of starting Mitch, if you wanted to give Nembhard the Josh Hart treatment, are you putting at that point Hart on Siakam? Or you can't put him on Turner, I don't think. Siakam really had much more success in game two. He's probably been the most consistent offensive threat, at least as a scorer. I know Haliburton has played well, but that it becomes a little bit tougher with double big because I think Indiana has better answers for it than Boston did. I think KP didn't have a good series. Horford can shoot, but he's not like, Turner is, he's come a long way as a shooter. So there are some issues there, but the reason why they played to a tie essentially, or at least played it neutral, is what you might, Mitch just gives you a level of offensive rebounding that mitigates on the other end, and that really puts them into I think on offense, if you're defending the Knicks, you have to deal with Brunson. You want to send bodies at him. You want to defend. You want to have size on Cat, and then you have this other guy who you like. He cannot be boxed out by one guy. Weirdly, I think the person who's had the most success boxing him out is probably Kevin Love a couple years ago. So maybe that's the kind of guy you need to throw at him. But it's an offensive threat. And as great as Hart is as a rebounder, it's just not the same. But there are trade-offs on defense. I'm interested to see how they adapt to, the Pacers kind of neutralizing Mitch on defense by, having him by him being on a shooter in the corner. I do pre-switch sometimes, or do you try to live with Hart on Siakam at times? I don't think Hart will be the biggest fan of that. But that'll be interesting to see. But I do want to get back to what you were saying. This is why you do experiment a little bit more in the regular season, right? Oklahoma City, right? That Hartenstein probably isn't in their best five, I don't think, right? And they've limited his minutes in some of the key playoff games, but they played a lot of double big during the regular season. And, we've talked about this a bunch of times. Is it Daignault. How do you pronounce his name?
Daignault.
Daignault. He said, yeah, like this is part of what we're learning. We want to find out how many different options we have. And this is something we've been critical of Thibs for. But you know what? He's at this point, he's going to be back next season. And it's deserved. In the grand scheme of things, I can't, like this guy, flaws and all, it's not a guy who deserves to be fired or is costing the Knicks a championship necessarily. And I mean, maybe you have that conversation if they get blown out in games 4 and 5, but we can. I think he's going to be back. So this is a kind of a learning opportunity to say, look, it was all well and good when we were, building an identity, trying to establish consistent success. We've gone to the playoffs now 4 out of 5 years. We've made the second round, 3 of them. We just made the Eastern Conference Finals. At this point, and you can argue, right, that well, they only got the 3rd seed by 1 game. So yeah, like pushing it to the pedal to the metal every game is what was needed. I don't know that they necessarily got the best results, but even if you think that it cost you a game or 2 in the regular season, at this point with the stakes we're chasing, we need as much information as possible. And you need the guys to kind of to have that, to understand what they're doing and to have played different, have done different things, right? We saw how, like Bridges has mentioned multiple times, how much even on switches they have these miscommunications, breakdowns. It's game 97, something like that. Yeah, this was game 97. They did a better job in the second half. But again, when you kind of don't do that in the regular season and suddenly you have to make a switch, it's tough for the guys to adapt on the fly. I do think it's certain guys who have transitioned more seamlessly than others, so it's not all on Thibs. But I do think that this offseason, regardless of the results going forward, we approach it and say, like, look, we've established a team identity. We don't need to just hammer that home. We need to work on adaptability now. And I think he's capable of that. I think he adjusts, and I think ultimately the guy wants to win. You kind of maybe from the front office have to coach him up a little bit on that, and kind of adapting himself a little bit more. Sure, but it's not like he's the same coach he was in Chicago or Minnesota. But I think that's the opportunity, and you're seeing both the benefits and kind of the trade-offs of doing that. And the last thing I'll say is it's easy to say, well, yeah, they lack depth. That's fair. This is not a deep team. I think Delon Wright and Landry Shamet aren't, the Pacers' 8th and 9th guys are better than ours. And most of the other teams are.
Are they? Are we sure?
We'll see with Delon Wright.
I'm not sure.
I think Landry Shamet.
I think the Pacers' depth has been overrated coming into this series. Like, it's amazing because I think there are people who like understand that, just scoring points doesn't make somebody inherently a better basketball player, at least not at the NBA level in 5-on-5 settings.
Their 9th guy's Obi. I think he's better than Shamet and Wright.
Like, I wouldn't take Benedict Mathurin over Deuce McBride if I would. There, okay, but it's again. So it's KJ McConnell, it's Shepherd, it's Obi, it's Mathurin. But I'm saying, like, even with that, I don't know. Like, I don't even know if I would want. Should Mathurin be playing? Like, are we sure? I want Mathurin to play. I would like if Mathurin kept playing. Reggie Miller, not so much, maybe. But I don't know. I just the depth thing I think is. Let's see. I'm just not of the opinion that their bench is so. I think
Deuce and McConnell is actually pretty close. I think. After that, and then we have Hart,
go ahead.
Right, or Mitch. So you have. So I think 6. Like we have. So Deuce and Hart are your top 2 guys off the bench. Yeah, I totally agree. Like I take Hart over Ben Shepherd, and Deuce and McConnell is at best a wash. I think especially this series, McConnell hasn't killed us the way he did last year. Last year I would have definitely said McConnell. But the different strengths, right? Deuce gives you spacing. They both give you a good point of attack defense, but Deuce a little bit, I think, bigger. And McConnell, has more of that creativity and mid-range and passing ability. So I'd call that a wash. I think Hart is better than whoever you want to call their seventh guy. But I think Obi is better than the eighth and ninth guys, and even a guy like Tony Bradley. But the point I'm making is that even when Thibs has had deeper teams, he hasn't leaned into that versatility. So that's where I'm like, people say, well, he can't experiment much because he doesn't have much depth. That's where I'm like, even when he had it, that's why we consolidated. Right? That's why you said we're not going to get the most out of Quickly or Obi. So let's consolidate. Well, now that you have that, then you can't use depth as an excuse. I do think though, like whether it's Dadier becoming playable or the taxpayer mid-level exception, get another wing in there. Ideally, you're getting someone who can move Josh Hart to the bench, whether that's a big or just a bigger guard with a little bit more floor spacing ability. Or who is just a lockdown defender. That could work too, I think. But yeah, I think, the point I was making is like, it is, like we said, it's not even worth talking about, wasted opportunities in the past. This offseason, this is the time to evolve from, okay, we've established identity. We have continuity. These guys have that chemistry. It's time to build that adaptability more and the versatility. So because we're going to have to win 4 series against probably a variety of different styles.
Yeah. I think the Knicks tried to do that this year. I think they made attempts with some of the players they acquired, campaign.
I'm talking about Thibs though, right?
Fully been
in-game strategies, rotations, those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, is he going to evolve? I mean, that's ultimately we know that he will try things, once it's desperation time, but I'm not sure that's enough. And I'm not, I don't really want to do the should they fire Thibs or not thing, because I tend to agree with you. Like, he's not going to. Yeah, well, I'm just saying, he's not going to get fired, so we know that. I suspect that anyway. I think there's more than enough reason to land on that as the ultimate decision. I think it's easy to want him fired, which I have at certain points, but seeing that he's genuinely tried things tactically on the defensive end of the floor that are really good, that have helped them win games, and that Boston series in particular is very encouraging. I think the fact that he didn't stick in drop in this series after kind of running with it in the first half of game 1 is a good sign. I think it's easy to be like, well, why were you in drop in the first place? Coaches can make mistakes. It's about adjusting that really matters. He made that adjustment. So I'm seeing stuff like that is very encouraging to me. I thought yesterday, I don't know if anybody's really talked about this, but I thought down the stretch of that game yesterday, and it's worth talking about, Brunson goes out. The defense was really, really good in the fourth quarter. Brunson did not have a good defensive game or series really so far yet. How much do they benefit maybe in this one instance of not having Brunson on the floor? That being said, one of the plays they had out of the late in the game was at 104-100. They ran that kind of full court, where they have everybody in the backcourt. They inbound the ball at the half line. The Knicks were all over that. They had that totally fucking covered. They got off a terrible shot, which they missed, and Hart gets the rebound. We close it out. But they were really prepared down the stretch of that game. The second half, especially, I thought their defensive communication, even in the starters minutes, I thought their defensive communication was much better than it had been in the first half, and honestly, for a lot of the first 2.5 games of the series. So I don't really know exactly what happened there, but they were passing off some of the ghost screens, brush screen stuff a lot more effectively. I thought their rotations off the ball were really good. I thought they made better multiple efforts on plays. Was it perfect all the time? No. They still had one of those plays where Josh Hart blew a rotation and Miles Turner got an easy dunk underneath the hoop. Perfection is asking for way too much, and it's honestly absurd to expect it against a team that scores as well as Indiana does. You're going to fuck up. It's going to happen. It's about the frequency, and the frequency in that second half was, it dropped significantly from what we had seen leading up to that point. So all of those things speak well to the job Tom Thibodeau's done. And he, again, like I think it's easy to just be like, well, he fucked this up, he fucked that up. God knows I've fallen into that trap many times. But you have to judge a season and you have to judge a coach in its totality. And if they lose this series, obviously it'll be bitterly disappointing. You'll always look back at that game one and be like, what the fuck was that? I can't believe we blew that game. But if you look at it if you look at the whole season in totality, and very specifically the playoffs, because nothing in that regular season, no matter how well he coached, if we had the same season the Cavs had in the regular season, and then we get to the second round, and let's say instead of beating the Celtics, we lose to the Celtics, I don't think anybody would be like, well, it doesn't matter because we had this awesome regular season. No, he'd be getting criticized for it. So the regular season was a slog for long portions of it. And even a lot of that opening round series against Detroit felt like a slog. But, there are a few things, right? I think Detroit deserves a lot more credit for making that series as competitive as they did. I think the Knicks clearly, or at least Thibs anyways, was comfortable holding off on making any significant tactical adjustments until the moment was required, which he showed in that Celtics series. And he's continued to try to tweak things defensively throughout this Indiana series. So, and also, like, yeah, you might not be right all the time, but you do have to give him credit for, hey, Brunson has 5 fouls. You know what? I'm just going to roll with him off the floor right now. I'm not going to take that risk, even though, in his heart, he wants Brunson on the floor. But he's like, no, I'm not going to take that risk. These guys are going good. I'll roll with that.
Really, yeah.
Right. It was. So he deserves a lot of credit for that. I think he deserves credit for the end of game 2. Like, I genuinely do. Not because, and again, as I said, I thought a lot of game 2 was a coaching loss, and I thought it was a really, really bad one. But what I mean is at the end of game 2, right, when he was kind of like, no, Cat's not playing well. I'm going to try out Mitch. We're going to go with this. All those big-time decisions you make, they're not always going to be right. And when they don't go right, God knows people are going to kill you for that. But I didn't have a problem with that decision. And I think more of those types of decisions that are hard, that are difficult, that are like, hey, I know Brunson's my best player. I know Cat's my second best player. But right now, with what we need, with what's working, this guy's got to sit. That guy's got to sit. Whatever it is, those are big calls. And you're always opening yourself up to criticism. But those are the type of calls that I think are necessary to win a championship. So, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And for that reason, I would agree that, like, whatever decisions the Knicks have facing them this offseason, I think a couple of them need to be like, can we come to an understanding of like, hey, the regular season now at this point really does need to be used to prepare for the eventualities of what might arise in the postseason, right? If Thibs can get to that viewpoint and get to that mindset, then I don't really want him gone at all, because I've gained a lot of confidence in him in terms of his ability to tweak in game, in series during this postseason in ways that I didn't always feel comfortable with, and for quite honestly, flat out doubted. I still think
the Miami series was probably the low point, right?
Yeah.
After the Miami series, if you told me he was going to outcoach Joe Mazzulla for 3-1, and then post-Tatum injury, whatever, but that was not on my bingo card. So
yeah, and you have that, and then like if he can come to that idea, understand that, and like honestly, like feel some level of security in your job, where you're like, look, man, even if you do lose your job, let me tell you what you're not going to lose your fucking job for is you gave Pacome Dadier 20 minutes on a random night in March. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what's going to get you fired here, buddy. Like, so work towards that understanding, hopefully, and hopefully this playoff run gives him some confidence to feel that way, and also some, maybe some live experience of like, okay, maybe this is why I should try stuff more. Will he stick to that? I don't know. Is that a feasible place to end up at? I don't know. I think if there is anything that I still have concerns about, is the offensive side of the basketball, where I think they tend to freelance and be disorganized more often than most teams.
Shax has done a good job documenting kind of their organized offense versus unorganized offense rate. And that game one, I think first half they were like 63%, and then it was much lower in the second half. And we saw kind of, their offense wasn't the biggest issue, but I definitely agree. And just shout out Shax for keeping track of that pretty closely.
Yeah. So, and maybe that requires that you have an assistant coach. Maybe that requires you replenishing kind of your assistant coaching ranks. But whatever the case may be, like, I think people need, like, however you feel about him, I think you need to accept that he's going to be back. And it's at that point the front office's job, because they will have chosen to stick with him going into his sixth season with the Knicks. At that point, it's incumbent upon you to tailor the roster to the coach that you've consistently stuck behind. And hopefully there's some give and take there too with him, where it's like, okay, like maybe they couldn't get me this wing that I wanted, but I still have Dadier, I still have Kevin McCullough or whatever. Like, I should give these guys an opportunity at least. But yeah, I mean, that's we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Thibs coached a very good game yesterday. Perfect? No. Infuriating at times? Absolutely yes. But games are going to be, they're going to have these swings, especially playoff games against a quality opponent. And, all that matters is you win. So, look, they were down 20, down 2-0. It's not looking good. I think that would have been a time that you fold, where it's like, you know what? This just isn't it. Pacers have it going. This is not our time. This is not our year. But they didn't. They fought. They battled to stay into the game. And, again, another part of coaching that is very significant is, do your players give you the effort consistently? And, I'm not under the illusion that this group of players is maybe as collectively a big fan of Tom Thibodeau as past groups have been. I'm not even under the impression that they're necessarily as tight and friendly with each other as other past Knicks groups have been. But end of the day, every time that it seems to be getting to a point of like, are they going to play for Thibs here? They come out and play for him. I don't know. That matters a lot.
I mean, they're all pros, and it's the mentality of each guy. There's frustrations for sure, right? The mentality of each guy though has been kind of that, either a really a tough defensive identity person like OG, or people that were drafted or didn't get opportunities, right? Deuce has had to get it out of the mud. He was the 34th pick, despite many draft analysts having him higher, but he's undersized guard who isn't a pure point guard, who isn't really a playmaker. I use the phrase I hate, so what I'll say is he isn't really a creator, but he's 6'2", and he's made that work. Mitchell Robinson went 34th in the draft and was skinny as hell, and didn't know how to play basketball really when the Knicks drafted him. And he's had to work his ass off. He's had to overcome adversity. You can call him goofy or whatnot, but coming back to this level with a foot injury as a big is far from a given. I think the Knicks played that well, by the way. You look at a guy like Mikal Bridges, who went through, very emotional draft night. If people remember, his mom, he grew up in the Philadelphia area, obviously played at Villanova. His mom was an employee for the Sixers, and he wore the hat, and then they found out he'd been traded to Phoenix. Went through struggles in Brooklyn. So these are guys who, when they're professionals, they're mostly vets. Deuce is really the youngest rotation guy, I guess. But he's been around in this culture for a while. So I don't think there's like these guys getting up for a game or getting up and realizing the moment. I don't think that's the issue. There are lapses in focus. There are definitely times when they get frustrated. It's that's usually not the worry. And I do think all of them, this is, I think what I will say, more than just the effort, you can get lots of guys to play hard, right? But desperation can lead to poor decision making as well. This team doesn't spiral because I do think, they spiraled maybe once in the Boston series where they couldn't get back in the game, right? In that game 3, game 5, things got away from them a little bit. But for the most part, this team, even when they're down, they don't spiral because, they really is that one possession focus. Like Brunson gives the same interview every time, right? We just focus on the next game. He's very stoic, right? But I don't think that's an act. And I think Thibs is like that too. And I think that trickles down to the rest of the roster. And that is, Thibs does deserve credit for that because they stay locked in. They don't drop the rope. They don't let the emotional weight of what's happening affect, kind of just being present. So, we'll see. I think that, but the way we would discuss the evolution of any player, look, we can talk about, everyone on the team can improve, and it's fair to discuss that. Brunson can improve his playmaking and decision making. Cat is what he is on defense. Probably, I think he's actually started to do this, but take more threes. Deuce, maybe work on keeping your head up or whatever, right? So it's not, but I think that is the last kind of infinity stone, if you will, for Thibs to kind of collect in his bag, right? And it's to say, he's going to make guys earn their minutes. I'm not saying he needs to like give Dadier tons of minutes, but just keeping the eye on the bigger picture and understanding the benefits of just getting more information. I don't want to use the word data because that's going to give data can be numbers, it can be visual. You're getting that information on how things look. Guys are getting their information on how where other guys like their spots. Yeah, you have practice for that, but a game is different, right? I do want to shift gears a little bit. So Cat had, you said, one of his best performances. That's one of the best fourth quarters I can remember from any Knick. The last Knick who did score 20 points in the fourth quarter was his teammate last year. But it's interesting because S. Barahani on Twitter tweeted, essentially put the defensive on-off numbers with Brunson and Cat, or with one of them, and it's basically way worse with both of them on the floor than just one of them. Part of that might be a lot of those minutes coming with Hart. But he said you have to stagger them as much as possible. I get staggering your stars to carry the bench, and I think Thibs has done a really good job of that this year, better than he did with Randall. That might have been some of Randall's limitations that caused that. But he's done a good job of staggering. If you need to stagger because those guys are just untenable defensively against the lead offenses. I hate to say this about after one of Cat's, like, this is going to be a game we remember his performance as a Knick. I hate to say this, but that does seem, if you're paying $60 million to a guy who you cannot play with your best player, that becomes an interesting roster issue. So I'm curious to your thoughts on that. And again, shout out to Cat. That was an incredible performance. I love him as a player. But, if that's the fundamental takeaway, maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe if you put Mitch there.
You love it? You love him? You love him again now?
What? I didn't shit on him that much, did
I? You wanted him fucking dead a few games ago.
No, I didn't.
After Game 5 in Boston.
I don't think I wanted him dead. I was probably critical of his play, but I'm saying I don't think. I think that look, this is more than Julius Randle ever gave us, and he's having his own resurgence to the playoffs. But I do think that's a Like, do you believe they're fundamentally unplayable together against top offenses? And if so, does that kind of necessitate some kind of a roster change?
I don't think it matters. I'll be honest with you. I think it's bullshit. Like, I think all this stuff is bullshit. I think every team, like, I think we're entering a very, very different era of the NBA. People need to understand that, like, what team is there right now in the postseason that's flawless? Is there some team that I'm missing that has no flaws? Is there some team, like, I'm not sure, because last time I checked, Oklahoma City paid for Isaiah Hartenstein this summer, and Chet Holmgren was their number 3 pick taken a couple years ago, who's supposed to be one of their future faces of the franchise. they're not very good together? Is that a crisis point? Should they blow it up? I'm just asking.
I mean, it might be if him and Shea were not good together. That's not the same thing, right? This is like saying, or if Mitch and Kat were together, that's the better analogy.
I think every one of these teams has issues. Every single one has issues. Like I'm sorry. I just find this entire, like, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. What the fuck are we talking about here? Like, they just beat Boston, who not just, forget us as fans, who the entire national media and every fan of every other team was like, the Knicks are going to get wiped out. They're going to get wiped out by Boston. Okay, well, that didn't happen. They won the series. Okay, and yeah, that starting lineup wasn't good. Was that starting lineup not good just because of Brunson and Kat's issues on defense? I don't think so. And to be honest with you, I think the issues that Brunson had in this game defensively are honestly being a little bit overblown. Like especially in the context of how can Brunson and Kat play together? I think in their total minutes together in this game, if I'm not mistaken, they were positive. In the minutes that they played in the starting five, and I mean yesterday's starting five with Mitchell Robinson, I believe they were either +1 or -1 total. Like, I think people are just going. I think we're overreacting to a series and moments in a series that is yet to be completed. I don't believe that you cannot field a functional lineup with Brunson and Kat on the floor together. And if there is an issue with it defensively, that's fair. There probably will be. That is why when you have them on the floor together, your focus should be, how do we get the absolute most out of this group offensively? That should be the focus. Create problems for other teams. And one of the issues they've had with Josh Hart in that lineup all year has been that they seemingly are doing nothing to maximize their strengths while kind of mitigating other teams' weaknesses in a lot of ways. So, no, I don't think it's real. I also don't think it completely matters. Like, the Knicks are very good. They're very good. They're clearly a very good team. They're one of the final four teams standing. Does that mean they're perfect? No. Does that mean that they have no work to be done this offseason? Absolutely not. They have plenty of things to do. They have to continue working at the roster, because that is how roster construction works, no matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. And they need to keep adding pieces to give them better options to put in lineups with Brunson and Kat. You know, they were limited this year with that. And they were limited for good reason, right? They traded all their picks for Mikal. They traded more stuff for Kat, and they were stuck under the second apron. They had to pinch their pennies and kind of very much bide their time to make sure they stayed cap compliant, which they pulled off. And, you know, next year they'll have an opportunity probably to replenish their depth in a more productive way. But no, I think it's bullshit is what I think, honestly. I really do. Like, I don't, like, they were up fucking 20 in game one, right? Or whatever, 17 in game one. They win that game. Let's say they win that game. And then they win last night's game. They're up 2-1. I don't think anybody's even talking about this. And I think the only reason it's being talked about is a very kind of odd set of circumstances that is clouding the larger data sample, and also specifically is also specifically related to this series against this opponent. You're never going to be a great defense with those two on the floor together. I'm not under that. I'm not denying that. I don't think they're unplayable together, and I certainly don't think that it warrants any hand-wringing over how we can't keep them together beyond this season or anything along those lines. And also, I'm going to say this: the next time, I want anybody to know this. If you tweet me during a game, I don't care what the score is. If the Knicks are down 60, if they're down 70, if they're down 100 motherfucking points, I do not care. If you send me a picture or a Photoshop of Kevin Durant in a Knicks jersey, or you suggest that we trade Karl-Anthony Towns for Kevin Durant, I am going to add you to like my 3-person long blocked list. That's what's going to happen. Kevin Durant is on a team that isn't in the fucking playoffs. That's what he's on. He's on a team that isn't in the playoffs. He hasn't won a playoff series in 2 fucking years. He hasn't been as far. He hasn't made a conference finals since he left the ultimate fucking boon for him. That was his Golden State time. He's done nothing in the postseason since then. In fact, Karl-Anthony Towns, the last 2 years, has won more playoff series than Kevin Durant has since he left Golden State. That shit is dumb. It's lame. And honestly, it's a fucking joke to be freaking out every time a guy who what does he finish? He finished third team All NBA. Clearly should have been second team over LeBron. But a guy that was a third team All NBA player to be constantly fucking dismissed and thrown into trades the moment he has a bad stretch is absurd. Fuck Kevin Durant. Karl-Anthony Towns, clearly a better player in 2025, and definitely somebody I'm more interested in building with and around in the next few years than the servant.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that. I think there's.
I wasn't saying you. Was not saying you. But I had many people every time he has a bad stretch, every time he has a bad game, the Knicks lose or whatever, you get fucking 50 of these people crying about, should we get Kevin Durant? Oh my God, we traded all our picks for Mikal Bridges. How could Leon do this? It's like, shut up. You're in the Eastern Conference Finals. You are in the Eastern Conference Finals. Did you think it was going to be easy? Did you think that you were going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and you were just supposed to sweep your way into the NBA Finals and then sweep whoever you play in? That's not how it works. That is not how it works. And the immediate reaction
broke a lot of people, though.
Yeah, well, no, people have been broken. Give me a break. Now, that's fucking horseshit. People have been broken forever, okay? Ever since the season started, as soon as we didn't beat OKC or Boston and Cleveland, it's been, oh my God, you got to get rid of all. And I have been fucking crazy in my own way. We've all been crazy about it. One thing I've been steadfast on is I do not think you trade this core away. I think the core is good. I think you need to add depth pieces. Nothing I have seen at all from this postseason run makes me deviate from that at all. Does Karl-Anthony Towns do shit that infuriates me? Yes. Yes, Josh Hart does too. Mikal Bridges does too. OG Anunoby does too. Fucking Jalen Brunson does too. All these guys do. The reaction to that, because you're down in a fucking game, in a series against a good fucking team, isn't to be like, oh my God, how can we try? Like, where are we as fans? Like, where is NBA fandom? Where every conversation, there's never an idea of like, how can we take this thing that is good? How do we take this thing that's good and make it better to get to increase the margins to win a championship? No,
this thing of ours.
It's just, oh, well, this didn't work, so how can we trade Cat for Giannis? Oh, this didn't work. How do we trade Cat for KD? Oh, this didn't work. What are we going to do with Mikal Bridges? Like, are we sure it's not working? Because they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, which is further than they've gotten since literally probably like half of the fucking fan base, at least the online fan base, has ever seen them do before. Half of the, like, fucking Zach and fucking like JC and Tyrese and Sam, these guys weren't even fucking alive when the Knicks were in the Eastern Conference Finals last. You know what I mean? Like it's okay if you get to the Eastern Conference Finals and it's not easy. And there are ups and downs, and you have to fight through some shit. And we'll see what happens. They're still alive, right? They're still they're down 2-1, but they're still in the fucking series now. We'll see how it ends up. But I think a team that's this close, and yes, has fortune benefited them in some ways? Yeah, sure, whatever. So has that's the case for every team that gets this far, generally speaking. But this team has now 2 years under its belt of they've been a top 3 seed in the conference. They've won 50 plus games, and they have, last year, obviously losing game 7 in the second round. This year they've gone to the conference finals. Does that guarantee that they're going to get back to the conference finals? That, they're going to win, they're going to get to the finals and win the finals this year moving forward? No, it doesn't guarantee that, which is why you still need to make improvements to the roster. But I don't know how your takeaway from this is this team needs fucking major surgery, and these two guys who played a bajillion minutes together all season can't play together, even though we have lineups that show that they can play together. Like, this stuff is nonsense. I reject all of it. I think it's easy. I think it's easier to say this thing doesn't work fundamentally than to look at it and be like, okay, but how can it work? How does it work? How can we make it better so that we get to a place where we can win.
That's specifically why I brought up the salary, because it does make it more challenging to add some of those depth pieces, right? I think ideally, I think there's a lot of ways it could work. I think the ceiling on defense is maybe even a little bit higher than you were suggesting. Let's say you add a guy like Herb Jones, right, in place of Hart, right? I think that could be a good defense, and still you'd have, I mean, you'd have a pretty good offense because you have two great scorers. I'm saying it's because of the salary where it makes that a little bit more challenging in a way that, if he made what Randall makes or something, it wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's definitely more challenging. There's no denying that, just because of the aprons and all that shit that we have now. But like, you're looking like, I mean, think about where you are, right? Like, you're effectively 7 games away from winning NBA Finals. Is it that far off that, like, I'm not even saying that you're suggesting this, but I've seen plenty of people suggest this. That, like,
I definitely don't want to trade for KD. I'll say that. I was thinking more like Jaren Jackson in pieces or something. Though, like, I'm not just throwing a name out, but like more.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like, I just find it. I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, you're pretty close. Like, and it's just weird to me because I'm like, do you think that, like, I don't know. I the way I just try to always think of it is like, before the series, I feel like you just had fucking every Knicks fans on Twitter just being like, oh man, these guys are food. We're gonna cook them. Halliburton, he can't defend anybody, and it's like, okay, but like they're up 2-1, right? So obviously maybe I didn't, but I think a lot of people probably underestimated what Indiana was capable of. But more importantly, it's like, if you can get away with like defensive, like I just think there's more scope for imperfect players and unbalanced lineups and all this type of stuff in the league we have now, because the it's so hard to keep groups of players together. It's so hard to hold all of these pieces together. I mean, you're already going to see it this summer with Boston, right? Like, this is why it was so funny to me during the season, where people are like, oh, well, we sold our fucking souls for the second round ceiling, and now we have no place to go up. And I'm not even saying that because I'd be lying to you if I said I thought the Knicks were going to beat the Celtics. I didn't think that at all. But I also was consistently like, yeah, Boston's not going to look like that next year, dude. They're not. Like, and maybe
that's without the Tatum injury too. They had
right, and right, and so maybe you can argue, well, because Tatum got injured, that's why they're probably going to be cutting salaries. I would call bullshit on that because I think they were going to do that anyways. But this is why, like, things can change like that, right? Like, that's how fast things can change in the NBA. I mean, 2 months ago, if I were to tell you the Knicks and the fucking Timberwolves are in the conference finals, you'd have been like, no, they're not. You're an idiot. Like, stop doing drugs. And I would have said, no.
Do you think we over-index on, like, those Raptors teams are always what I think of, right? The team that just really good regular season every year, kept saying one day it actually did end up working out for them, but they had to make a huge trade and have a little bit of injury luck. Or do you think people who talk about second round ceiling and all that over-index on teams like the Raptors, the Blazers that just couldn't get over the hump, and forget maybe examples of teams that benefited from that continuity and all that?
I mean, the problem with the Blazers was that they just never made a trade. They never tried to level up. The Raptors, like, there is a value to getting to that second round consistently because you know what your floor is. You know, like, okay, we do this every year. What do we need? How do we get the player? How do we get the pieces that take us to that next level that make us a true championship contender? I'm, maybe my definition of championship contender is different from other people's. But I'll say this, I didn't think coming into this season the Knicks were a true championship contender. I thought if things broke right that maybe they could end up in that place. I didn't think before the Boston series they were a true championship contender. But I thought, yeah, maybe if things break their way in terms of injury luck, that might be the case. Well, they were up 3-1 basically before Tatum even gets hurt. And, whatever, they obviously go on to win the series. Did they get lucky at times in that series to be up 3-1, given the kind of margins we're talking about here? Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. But who doesn't need luck to win a championship? Who doesn't need luck to make deep playoff runs? Everybody has luck. I don't see that discussed for, do people diminish what the Pacers did this year because if it exists, it only exists online. It doesn't exist anywhere else. The Pacers have made 2 conference finals in a row, but they have flaws. I don't care what their defensive rating is. They're not a good defensive team. They have issues on that side of the ball very, very clearly. Minnesota, their half-court offense is fucking terrible. OKC, their half-court offense is terrible. Like, none of these teams is imperfect. None of these teams is, like, the best thing you can say about Oklahoma City and Minnesota is that at times their defense is so suffocating that it juices their offense to the point that it doesn't even matter that they're not good half-court offensive teams. None of these teams is perfect. So, it doesn't really matter to me who wins the champion. I mean, it matters to me who wins the championship. Sorry, that's not the right way to put it. But regardless of which one of these 4 teams ends up winning the championship, I promise you, not a single one of them is going to go into the offseason and be like, you know what? We're good. Everything is good here. Every one of these teams has flaws. Maybe ours seem to be more significant or glaring to people than others. These other 3 teams. But I think all of these groups have flaws. And really the question you just need to ask yourself is, are the flaws so significant that you just can't ever compete with these guys? But if you can, then why would you make the trade, right? Like the reason the Knicks made the Cat trade, a large part of it is because they knew with the Brunson extension, they could fit him in under the salary, the second apron, and they'd have this core of players that they could build with over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Another part of it is I don't think they wanted to extend Randall. And the final part of it is they knew if they extended Randall, they would be over the second apron, and it would make getting a player like Cat impossible. And then also, given his salary slot, just purely talking about it in that sense, given how much money Cat makes. And then also they needed a center. So, it's just, I think there's a bigger plan here than people really want to kind of give credence to. And I think it's easy to just be like, well, they went all in, so they, anything less than a championship is a failure. I think that's fine to look at it that way in the macro sense. I probably even feel that way. But I think in year one, kind of given the full circumstances of how this is all unfolded, again, we'll see how the season ends. But I think a lot of people are just getting so into the moment currently that they're not able to appreciate kind of like how this has come about. I mean, 5 years ago, if I told you, hey, the Knicks are going to make the playoffs for the next 5 years, they're going to win a playoff round in 2 of those years, and then they're going to go to the conference finals in the 5th year, you probably would have been like, yeah, I'll take that right now. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Sounds like that team has a chance to win a championship. I think we would think a team that isn't the Knicks, that went on the same exact run that they're on right now and was built the same exact way they're built right now, we might be like, they're flawed. It might be hard for them to make that final incremental progress to be, to be the last one standing, to be the champion at the end of the day. But I think it would be, I don't know, I would struggle for us to be like, they have no chance. Like, it was fun to make fun of Indiana last year, don't get me wrong. But even within, like, making fun of them, I think I was pretty consistently like, I think they probably just need to make a couple trades, but they definitely have they have a lot of the infrastructure you need. Maybe I was even wrong about that. Maybe they don't need to make any trades. Maybe they're just really good and they can win a championship with this current group. Maybe that's possible. But that's kind of the point, right? Like, I don't think and I'm including myself in this, I think we say things with such certainty sometimes. And now I just kind of look at the league this year and the league the last few years. You don't see it. The last repeat champion was that Golden State team, right? So we're talking about 2017 and 2018. Since then, we've had a new champion every year. And it's not just new champion. Like this year, the final 4 teams this year, only like 2 of them are new, right? And even Minnesota, who's back in the conference finals, they made a huge kind of identity-changing trade this offseason. I'm expecting a lot more playoff surprises moving forward than I think we're accustomed to. We're, especially us as like older fans, but like when you become accustomed to like, well, the NBA playoffs kind of works this way, the favorites usually win, and and these, we kind of know who the championship contenders are to start every year. Maybe, I know people had like OKC obviously as the favorite to start the year. Knicks got some buzz. Pacers maybe had some buzz. I think people were down on Minnesota. But look at, what's left here. It should be kind of telling that that's the case. And I think all of us, myself included, should have a little bit more humility to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't know shit. And maybe like these things that seem like, how could you ever get over this? Maybe they're probably not as impossible of a task, kind of given the type of and levels of teams we're seeing now getting to conference finals and maybe even beyond. Even look at the Western Conference last year. Dallas gets to the finals. I don't think anybody would look at that team and be like they were perfectly built or something.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I think there's generally, I think there's a lot of one. I think with LeBron kind of fading a little bit, not fading, but LeBron is no longer the bar none best player in the league. Steph is still very effective, but there isn't a guy like that. I think people think Wemby is going to be that next guy, but I hate this face of the NBA talk. But there isn't a guy that is. I guess this is maybe insulting to Jokic, but it's not like the way that LeBron would guarantee you a finals berth, or Jordan at his peak would, was essentially a ticket to the finals, right? And we kind of probably neglect how many times in NBA history, even Hakeem only made the finals 3 times, and he's top 10 player. I like what you said about we often talk about these things with certainty. I think it neglects a few things. One, whenever you come up with these hard, and me and you do this all the time. This is, we're bullshitting about sports. Whenever we come up with these hard and fast rules, right? These heuristics, they can be interesting, thought experiments, or whatever, but we're often dealing with very small samples. The NBA itself.
Just to that point, like, do you remember like before the Warriors won in 2015? Do you remember constantly it was like, can't just win shooting jumpers, gotta have a guy in the post, and it's like, yeah, because that's how the talent. Forget the game. The game follows talent. The talent used to be, okay, this is how we're gonna go inside and we're gonna feed the big man and all that stuff. The talent has changed. The talent pool has changed, and therefore, past things that were true about past generations, they just don't apply to the current modern league. And that's not me being like, oh, the modern NBA or whatever. Like, no, it's just the game is different. It's just different. So,
and it will be different in 10 years, right? The same rules that apply now.
Right. Yeah.
It's a dynamic.
Centers didn't matter 5 years ago. Now thinking about trying to say centers don't matter.
Yeah, and also now you even have double big lineups, right? Because teams are it's an adaptive system. Which is also why I hate when people are like, analytics solved the game or ruined the game. It's like, no, teams are going to. On both sides, right? There are people in the analytics space who will use some of these learnings as dogma when even those things might change, right? 3-point luck didn't matter before. Maybe it does now, right? Or maybe 3-point defense or 3-point percentage defense, as teams adapt to this new reality, maybe that does become a thing, right? Contests and all of that. There are a lot of really smart people working very hard on these problems. Both scouts and on the analytics side. It's not going to stay the same. That's the one thing you can bet on. You can't predict where it's going to go. So I like that you said that. And it's things like, it might have made perfect sense to say you can't win with a small guard. But, if you're, has a team put him next to 3 great defenders and a stretch 5, has there been a small guard who can control the pace, doesn't turn the ball over, and has that level of control? Maybe CP3, I guess, right? I am putting Brunson in pretty steep company, as much as we love to shit on CP3. But the thing is, it's never the same thing, right? Not all 6'2" guards are like, and it's to your point, it's a different NBA. Look, the team that I've thought about, one was the Bulls because they put 2 elite defenders next to a couple of offensive players who were poor defenders, but also has a team ever won with its point guard and center not being great defenders or being subpar defenders? Yeah, we just saw it a couple years ago, right? Now you can say Jokic is better than Kat and Brunson, but I think Brunson's better than Murray. But that was the rule. Jokic is too much of a defensive liability for them to ever win a championship until it happened, right? Dirk was too soft and too much of a finesse player to win a championship until he out finessed, or his finesse took down the second best player of all time at finals on a super team. So, it used to be conventional wisdom. You need to beef up, have 2 or 3 stars. This is a star-driven league. Now it's all about depth, right? So, I think that's fair to say. And it's tough to, you can plan a pretty picnic and you can't predict the weather or whatever. That kind of says it all, right? It's sometimes you just got to sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah. We are ultimately everything that, I mean, this is what makes sports fun, is it's like it's not predictable. People surprise you and teams surprise you. And, that's why Steph Curry went 7th in his draft. You know what I mean? Like, obviously if you did a redraft, Steph Curry goes number 1, but who the hell knew Steph Curry was the paradigm of the league that is like exists now, where a guy like Steph Curry is encouraged and championed to like play the way he does, empowered to shoot the 3 and take the shots he does. That didn't even exist when he was drafted. Like, if you told us that at the time, you'd been like, what fucking coach is going to let him do that? Like, that's not going to happen. Like, no coach is going to let you just jack up fucking 12 threes a game or whatever the hell you did. But that's where we are now. Like, the game has changed. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns has talked about this, how, like, when he was at Kentucky, Calipari didn't let him shoot threes. Calipari's like, no, you got to get in the post because that's where you're going to, that's where your game's going to be in the NBA. And now you think about that. Now we're always like, oh my God, I wish Cat would shoot more threes. I wish he'd shoot more threes. Like, you just don't know for sure where the game is going, who is going to be able to kind of keep up and fit into those trends.
And then the salary cap plays a role there too, right? Because once everyone got Steph, they're like, everyone now wants that hot shooting guard, right? When Derrick Rose blew up, everyone's like, I want that super athletic big guard. But then maybe another archetype gets undervalued, right? Maybe bigs get undervalued. So people are like, all right, if I can figure out how to make these bigs work, if I can figure out how to make a guy like Alperen Sengun work, he's super undervalued. That's just using an example. I know you're not a huge fan of his, but that's part of it, right? Like, because teams heard and they you get into, everyone wanted these 3-and-D wings. Well, then maybe how can I work with other archetypes that are undervalued now? If somebody's not a great shooter like a Derrick Jones Jr., or how can we figure out ways to take advantage of it? I mean, it's I don't want to call it straight Moneyball, because I do think it's more than just analytics. It is understanding where value is, right? Which you can use data to inform that. You can also use expertise and subject matter expertise, which a lot of these GMs who never open a spreadsheet in their life still have that intuition. So,
yeah, the salary cap is also part of it, because it also just changes what you're able to do, how much talent can you retain, right? All these things are variable; they change constantly. And I still think, like, again, like, I really believe this. I don't think people, even now, even with seeing some of the costs that come with the second apron and how it hamstrings you, it still doesn't feel like people fully grasp what that means. Like, I think Kevin Durant's getting traded this summer. I think whenever that happens, what the price of, his acquisition cost, I think it will be significantly lower than people think it will be, because the amount of teams that are interested in him, how many teams can even functionally get him, his age, like, all these things play into it. So even though he's still a good player, it's like, yeah, but all these other things weigh down what his true value is. Like Cat's a great player, right? But because of his contract, like, his contract is one of the main reasons the Knicks were able to get him at the price they got him, because the value of all of this stuff has changed fundamentally under this new CBA. And I think people are still not properly adjusting for that. Like, and honestly, I'm not even sure that we'll fully see kind of the full ramifications of all of these things. The what is effectively a hard cap at the second apron. I don't think we'll see the full ramifications of it for another few years. I think teams are still kind of having to unwind some decisions they made prior to the CBA kicking in. You have
and by the
teams
time
that
they
made
understand
trades.
it, there'll
Yeah,
be a
there
new
might be a new CBA. Right. So who the hell knows? But this is why it's ever evolving, because back in whenever, there was a time where you could just go over as much as you want and it didn't matter. It didn't really matter. You didn't have to do anything. You just paid your guys, you paid a dollar for dollar tax, and that was that. That's obviously changed now. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. To get back to we got really meta with this.
I gotta ask this: do you think KD is going to be the biggest star who gets traded this offseason? I'm asking about a specific.
I know who you're asking about. I think the money is all on him on this player getting traded. I'm just gonna say Giannis doesn't get traded. That's what I'm gonna say.
I assume you'd trade Karl-Anthony Towns for him if that was an
option. I think yes. I also think I think Giannis is trickier to build around at his age, given his skill set, than people give credence to.
The defense isn't as consistently elite, right?
Well, that's one thing, but I don't even care about that much because I figure, you get him to the playoffs, he'll probably that you can figure that out. But I think it's telling that his combination with Dame, and I understand Dame obviously carries responsibility in this too, but I think the fact that did not work out as well as it felt like it should on paper, that should give you some pause as to the ease of which it is to build with Karl or with Giannis, and necessarily how seamless of a fit it might be between him and Brunson, because I don't think that's the case. I think Cat has a more naturally symbiotic game with Brunson, and even with that, we've seen them have issues, right? And some of that has to do with the pieces around them as much as it has to do with them kind of developing chemistry or whatever. But yeah, I think Giannis presents a lot of similar challenges. Is he a better player than Karl-Anthony Towns? Yeah, of course. But again, I just think team building in general is a lot trickier now than it's ever been, maybe. Because even the stupidest teams in the NBA today are smarter than most teams were back in 2003 or something. That just, if you compare, just the funniest thing to do is to compare 2019 Steve Mills to 2006 Steve Mills, and you're like, oh wow, even he just learned that it's probably okay to not sink all of your salary cap into long-term contracts and trade out all of your first-round picks constantly. Good job, Steve Mills.
Wasn't there a discussion I don't know if it was Hinkie or Morey or whatever, right? But there were GMs who would just to get a trade done, if you're can you make it top 5 protected? Can you make it top 10 protected? Or they wouldn't negotiate over protections now, right? Now I'm pretty sure GMs are negotiating over the number pick of protection, right? So, people learn, there's blind spots, right? People were realizing that, taking on bad contracts with picks has value, and then giving up those picks just to get off bad contracts if you don't have a plan, probably not a good idea. So those kind of things happen. But yeah, we got meta, so got a little off topic, but
yeah. Yes. To get back to the series, one thing I thought that was very curious was there were a lot of minutes with Cat and Hart in that second half. They stuck with the big on Cat. They did not do the thing that we've seen a lot of teams do. Do you expect that to change? Because through 3 games, we've mostly just seen them kind of stay with having a big on Cat. I'm curious to just throw this at you. Why do you think that is? And do you think that changes as we go forward? Because I know Cat has not had the most maybe consistent series. offensively, I think he's been fine. I mean, he had, 35 and 12 in game one, and then last night he goes for 24 and 15. Obviously, he has that monster fourth quarter. But yeah, just curious to kind of get your thoughts on that.
I don't think Indiana's defense has been that bad. I thought the Knicks played really well on offense in game one. Game two is a little bit more up and down. But I thought Indiana had some success. I mean, the Knicks are a great offense, right? So understanding that, I don't think they would panic after yesterday. So why haven't they done it, right? I think there's a couple of reasons. And I do think one of them could be a reason why they go to it now. The number one reason I think is the Knicks' best player has cooked the guy that they repeatedly, the guy that they play him, the guys that's typically their main point of attack defender. That's Nembhard. Going back to last season, Brunson has had very consistent success against Nembhard. The only option, and he worked, I have to give credit, he worked pretty well yesterday, was Nesmith. So when you put Turner on Hart, right, then you get cross match, right? Then Nesmith really has. You can put Siakam on Cat, but that's a tough matchup to hold up, right? Cat has really had his way with Siakam as well, and then you put Nesmith maybe on OG or something. You could try that, but I really, or you could put Nembhard on you put Nembhard on OG or Mikal. I think it creates some issues, and I think they really. So I would think they really want Nesmith on Brunson. I do think they don't have a lot of good options against Cat, and I think those are like kind of the main two reasons. Now it's less of an issue if Hart is coming off the bench. The starters I think only played 3 minutes, and I think they were like a plus 12 hilariously. But with Nesmith's injury, I mean he came back and played. I wasn't paying too close attention. I heard a couple people say, well, he didn't look the same on that OG block. I don't know. But if Nesmith is somewhat hampered by that ankle sprain, or you don't want to tax him too much, well, that also makes it, is it more, if the alternative is putting him on Cat, that's also a difficult situation. But if they don't want him chasing around Brunson all game, or if they don't trust him to be able to hold up, I could see them, trying some different maneuvers. But we'll see. I think it might be a little bit moot though if the Hart plus the starters lineup isn't going to play that much anyway. I think they have put a center on Hart when it's like bench lineups. Like I think they put Obi on him.
Sorry, say that again.
I think they have put a center on him with bench lineups. Like I think they put Obi on Hart at times before. So I mean,
yeah, it's hard to kind of understand what's going. Yeah, it's hard to kind of understand what the matchups are sometimes with them because they play these funky lineups. But yet, I don't know. It seems like they've been pretty religiously going with the center on Cat because even when Tony Bradley's been on, and Cat's been on at the 5. I think they're defending him with that with Bradley. I do think to the point you're making, they don't have like a real big wing, right? Like their biggest wing is Nesmith or Mathurin, and and Nesmith has been on Brunson, which he's that makes sense. And Mathurin has been terrible, so you don't really have a big wing defender. I mean, I am a little surprised that they didn't. And also should be noted, they won the starter. Yeah, so they won the starter minutes, right? And when with our original starting 5, so their strategy, whether it's ideal or optimal or whatever, like it was working in those matchups. I'm also not sure that you want Pascal on Cat and then put Turner on somebody else. Like, I don't know. It's a weird one.
You could put Pascal on Hart and then put, Nembhard or someone on OG or Mikal, but I don't think they love those matchups either.
Yeah, those are not great matchups for them either. And like I know Mikal has struggled mightily from 3, but his mid range has generally been good this entire postseason. And in this series, I think like he had a bunch of shots in games 2 and 3 that didn't go down that I thought were good shots for him. I would bet that Indiana thinks that those shots will go down for him if they just give him, put Nemart on him or put, somebody smaller on him that he can hunt. So I think
That layup
that's
he
part of
passed up,
your.
by the way, the blocked layup. I'm really happy for him that they won that game because that was brutal. The one where he got the ball open, went under the rim and get blocked instead of just going up. Like, I'm sure there's ways to rationalize it, but man, that was.
Well, it was a bad highlight, that's for sure. I actually thought when you watched it on the replay, like he probably has to go reverse there. He took a really fucking weird reverse. Like I don't know what the hell that was, but I think it was the right decision. But look, it just cards to the table. The optics don't look good when everybody's like, why can't you just go to the rim hard and finish for fucking once, man? Like, we haven't seen it all series. Can we just do that? Like, he's the weirdest. He's one of the weirdest players I've watched because it's like, how do you go from like, I am going to go dunk on Cade Cunningham on his fucking head to like some of the stuff you're seeing in the series where you're like, there's been multiple shots I've seen where he has an avenue to the rim, but he like ends up pulling up and doing some weird fadeaway like 7 feet out. It's like, dude, just go to the fucking rim. You've got the size on a few of these guys, like whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I think the matchup stuff, to go back to that, I think they're just not comfortable with it because they don't really have the type of wing that I think you want to put on Cat to make his life hard. And they don't have a guard like, say, Drew, right, that can defend up a little bit more and defend up size a little bit more than their guys can. So it's an interesting thing to think about. I do wonder if they maybe try Pascal on him in this next game and then put Turner just on Mitch. I don't really remember the start. It was hard to know at the start of this game how they were doing that because we didn't feature Cat at all. And honestly, if there is a criticism, or not a criticism necessarily, I mean, I guess it is criticism, but if there is something to look at for the Knicks, just like a very much low-hanging fruit that they can go to kind of juice their offense, especially early on, that would be it. Go to Cat early in the game. Like, you cannot have a quarter where Cat just doesn't shoot the ball, doesn't touch the ball, and isn't involved. Like, I'm happy that they seem to be trying to make some concerted effort to get McCall touches early in the game. It needs to be better. Like, that all of that can happen. Brunson can get shots. McCall can get shots. All that can happen. Cat cannot get lost in the mix. He's too important. He's one of your two guys.
This is a matchup for him. This is a very enticing matchup.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going to go with that. So I don't know if you want to take it that and you kind of elaborate on it a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's no disrespect. I think Siakam's a quality defensive player. Turner's a very good defensive player. But like you said, Mitchell Robinson has been cooked by certain guys that are, that can stretch the floor. And the other thing is when you have Mitch in the game, or with Hart no longer in the game, they can't help on those Cat drives. Cat drives can be an adventure because he doesn't pass out well. And I'd be curious if they help more aggressively. Like, he had that dunk and one at the end of the game where, the help was a little bit too late. So it was a blocking foul. If Indiana's more aggressive, they can get him into some turnovers. So, living with Cat drives, which is, I think, what he's going to be forced to do because Turner's not going to keep letting him shoot threes, is it's a little bit of a dangerous game to play. But, we can start going back. I think now, if they're not putting a center on Cat or a center on Hart, you can start going back to more Cat Brunson pick and rolls, right? If they switch Turner onto him, that's a matchup I like. And if they put a guard on Cat, of course, that's a matchup you like in the post. They might help off Mitch, but with him in the dunker spot, this would be a read I would love to see Cat start making a little bit more often. Is once you get downhill and they're sending help from Mitch, maybe you don't throw him a tough pass or an alley-oop or something, but get the ball up on the rim at least, right, without turning it over. Because if no one's blocking out Mitch, it's the Kobe assist thing can work. So they have a lot of different ways to attack because of Cat's ability. Because Indiana doesn't have an answer for Cat, and they don't have an answer for Brunson. So there's a lot, and they don't really have a good answer for that matter on Mitchell Robinson on the glass, which I think was very frustrating about just the offensive struggles they've had it for types of these series. But again, it goes back to that difference in styles, right? For Indiana, it's been all of the different ways Carlisle has devised to attack Brunson and Cat, to create motion. Indiana's constantly making the right reads, it seems. It's kind of like they're the Swiss Army knife offense where they can hurt you so many different ways. and the Knicks are the hammer, right? They do the same thing. It's not very surprising, but you have two for them unsolvable problems. If we're lucky enough to face a team like Oklahoma City, that might not be something you can go to the well with as much. But yeah, I totally agree. I think you definitely have to get Cat more involved. And I don't even think it's tough to your point, right? Like it can, like the coach is trying to, we've criticized them for not getting Bridges involved. We've criticized them for not getting OG involved. And those guys, you need to keep them engaged, because if OG isn't getting the ball on offense, sometimes, his defense might not be what you need from it. Right. You want to, you want to keep all these guys involved. You want Hart to push the ball and be aggressive. And then sometimes you can look up and like, well, that guy, the mismatch nightmare, is 4 points going to the fourth. And to his credit, Thibs did ride that hot hand down the stretch. But I think that, from a matchup perspective, that is especially if Neesmith is on Brunson, I think Cat is even more unstoppable in some ways than that Neesmith-Brunson matchup, which has caused some problems for Brunson.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, we'll see. Look, 2-1 is literally the best you could have expected after they dropped game 2. So kudos to them for winning, but they still have a lot of work to do. They got to win 3 of 4 left in the series. Now, it doesn't matter how they do it. Doesn't matter the order they do it, but they got to win 3 of 4. That's not an easy place to be. Indiana did it to them last year. Obviously, their circumstances were more favorable, not just because of the Knicks' injury issues, but also because of the home court advantage, right? Like they still had 3 games left at home in that series. The Knicks will have 2 games left at home the remainder of the series. Maybe that's a good thing, because the Knicks fucking suck at home. They're 3-5 at home in these playoffs, which is fucking unbelievable. But yeah, funny enough, I think Indiana's actually, they're shooting worse from at home than they are on the road. So maybe this all plays into the Knicks' hands somehow. We'll see. They have a game tomorrow, obviously, big game, game 4 at Gamebridge Fieldhouse, whatever the fuck the name of this stupid ass fucking stadium is.
Sorry, I think that last year when it was 2-1, the Pacers would only have had 2 games left at home, right? Because games 5 and 7 were.
Yeah, I'm just talking about from being
2-0.
2-0 down. Yeah. So, yeah, the Knicks, they have to do the same thing that Indiana did last year. A little bit of different circumstances, but they have that in front of them. Neesmith, we'll see what his ankle situation is. Apparently, he was limping pretty good after the game. To me, that looked like a type of injury that, like, in the regular season, you probably don't come back into that game. That would be my guess. But we'll see. Josh Hart came down on his knee at the end of the game. I think he's fine. By the way, we didn't even talk about it. I just want to say it before we finish up. Josh Hart was fucking awesome in that fourth quarter yesterday. He was awesome. The rebounds he got were massive. That rebound he gets at 102-100, he high points the ball. He looked like a fucking free safety out there or something. That was an incredible play. And then he makes both free throws too. I can't say enough about the game he played yesterday. Not that it was perfect. I thought he got off to a pretty bad start, actually. But to stay focused, to not pout about being benched, and to just give your team everything that they needed from you in that moment. It's
3 offensive rebounds, too.
It just speaks volumes.
With Mitch.
Yeah. It just speaks volumes about the player he is, the teammate he is, the professional he is. Even though he likes to pretend he's none of those things when he talks to the media. He is fantastic, and he was great for the Knicks yesterday. So I wanted to give him a shout out. And also Deuce McBride, who I thought was huge to close the third quarter. And then, man, his defense in that fourth quarter and just in the second half in general, everybody, OG too was fucking fantastic. Cat had multiple good defensive sequences. It was stunning. Like the way they played in that second half defensively, it's as good as it gets, man. They were fantastic. They held them to, 42 points in the second half. Outscored them 61-42 in the second half. So, yeah, that was.
Is it hyperbole to say Deuce is the Knicks' most important defender in this series? I think you kind of hinted at this before, but
no, I think you can argue that that's probably been the case all year. They just haven't realized it.
I mean, I think there's certain matchups where the size does matter, but he is the only guy who's really been able to stick with Halliburton.
No, I mean there are matchups where obviously I guess the best way to put it is OG is Deuce their best defender? No, he's not. But I do think in terms of importance, you can pretty logically argue that he is their most important, along with Mitchell Robinson, because those two guys are the best at what they do, and nobody on the team can do what they do quite as effectively as them. And what they do allows you to get more out of Mikal Bridges, out of OG Anunoby, and yes, out of Josh Hart. And I think that matters. I think that matters a lot. And it does. It helps protect guys like Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not steadfast on he is the most important, but I certainly think you can make that argument.
Yeah, I mean, like in the Boston series, I still would have said OG just because their best two scorers are wings. But in this, like against the guard heavy teams, it'll be interesting. Again, like I don't want to look ahead, and this is still a very entertaining series and one that the Knicks are behind in. I am curious if Deuce would get more run against SGA. That is where size would probably matter a little bit more than Halliburton, because Halliburton's not looking to post you up or shoot over you in the mid range. He wants to get to that step back, or he wants to get to the rim, which are two things that Deuce is great at taking away, and he's great at navigating screens against a guy like SGA. I wonder if I don't think we saw it much in the regular season. Deuce wasn't getting heavy minutes in those games. That is where I wonder if that's really tenable. But maybe that's a series where you go back to OG at the point of attack.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'll worry about OKC when we get to that point in the season. But right now, I mean, look, OKC still got a series to win too. Game 3 did not go
well. Was shocking. I didn't watch the first half, and I just turned it on, and it was like
I didn't watch a single second of that game because I was watching Mission Impossible.
Oh, how was it?
Awesome. Definitely recommend going to see that in theaters.
We'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Well, my friend after game 1, my friend who's a Nets fan, but he's a nice Nets fan, he was like, "You should go see Mission Impossible to get your mind off that game." So maybe I'll do that.
Still got time in the day. You got more time than me, West Coaster. All right. I think that's a good place to end this. Stacy, let people know they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
You can find me at StacyPadden89 on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'll plug all the great work at the Strickland. Miranda's, especially Matt Miranda's had a couple of pieces. He wrote a really nice recap of a fun game to recap yesterday. And he also had a piece on Halliburton. Written from Knicks fans' perspective, obviously super talented writer. I highly recommend checking those out, as well as all the other stuff at the Strickland.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment. Check that all out. Check out the post games. Check out the article. The recaps have been awesome. Colin and Miranda have been doing great work on those, so definitely recommend that.
Wow, thanks, Shwin.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Not Stacy. Stacy had a recap that was terrible and maybe the worst thing you'll ever read. So if you want to read that, give it definitely check it out. It's a good example of what not to do for all aspiring writers. No, Stacy's was also very good. But yeah, that is our show for today. The Knicks play tomorrow night, Tuesday night. I have no idea what time it is. Probably at 8 again. So we'll be on the lookout for that. All right. We will. I think I'll be on for that post game, but if not, we'll have somebody on with you. All right, that is the show for today. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Memorial Day weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday. Peace.